Hello everybody, welcome back to the video, and today I'm going to be ranking the 6 Bond actors. Now, I think all of them have great aspects to them. Whether it be a specific movie, their acting chops, their cool factor, regardless, I'm ranking them based on, are they a good Bond? You know, which one is the best? Now, number 1 would stay the same any given day. However, the 6 through 2 really could swap any day. This is how I feel about them right now, and I think they are all really good. But they do each have their own issues and really good points. So, let's get started with last place. Coming in last place is Roger Moore. Now, Moore has some really good aspects to him as Bond, but ultimately, right, out of his 7 movies, the big thing he has going for him is he's the longest running Bond. 7 movies in the role is a really impressive feat. However, I think that while some of them are really enjoyable, I think he only truly made 2 greats. The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. Yes, I love Moonraker. It's actually really good. He has an okay start with Live and Let Die. Golden Gun takes a little bit of a weird turn. Obviously, the 2 I already mentioned, Spy and Moonraker, are really good. I'm not a big fan of For Your Eyes Only. I think it's kind of overrated. His following movie, which has a not great word in it, is actually kind of fun. And he ends on A View to a Kill, which is maybe the most disappointing end for a Bond actor. Because it really could have been one about him exploring his age. Because he was almost 60. In that movie, and yeah, that is an issue, which is, it's a little creepy seeing him with all these, especially in his last movie, with someone who's young enough to be his granddaughter. Yeah, it gets weird with that. However, when they pair him up with someone who is age appropriate, it's actually really good. Particularly that penultimate one. I think that's when he has the best Bond girl of his era, the titular character of that movie. Like I said, he's really good in The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. But I think those are his only 2 greats. He still has a bunch of good, but it's just he has 2 greats. So, with that being said, let's move on. Number 5 is George Lazenby. Why does Lazenby rate above Moore? Because, funnily enough, we're actually going from the Bond who had the most movies to the Bond who had the lowest amount of movies at 1. Well, put simply, it's Lazenby's movie, and the role is one of the best Bond movies. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is fantastic. Lazenby, I think, is what Craig ultimately did. I'm going to get to Craig later, but Lazenby was sort of the stepping point. And I actually think he's that stepping off point for the Bonds to show, that more emotional layer. Because while Connery was great at just being cool and delivering the one-liners, you didn't really get to see what makes him tick. Lazenby is a Bond in which you see what makes him tick. Especially, he has some good moments in this movie. Basically, anytime he's on screen with Diana Rigg, you completely buy, at least I do, completely buy the fact that these 2 are falling for each other, which makes that ending so sad. Seriously, that ending was, oh boy, yeah. Now, okay, Lazenby has a few moments where his performance might not be the best, but it's made up for with those great moments with Diana Rigg. Particularly the ending and the barn scene in which he proposes to her. It's really good. Also, he's pitted against perhaps the best Bond villain, or at least the most underrated, in the form of Telly Savalas' Blofeld. If I ever do a video on Blofeld, I mean, obviously you know he's number one, but Savalas just is really good in the role. And it might be the best Bond-Blofeld dynamic the series ever did. It's very good. But ultimately, I mean, I can't really... Lazenby gets one of the best movies in the series, but I mean, I really can't put him higher than this, right? If he had another movie or two, I'd be more willing to actually put him in the top half of this list. But I really don't feel comfortable giving the guy who did one movie a spot higher on the list. He beats out Roger Moore because Moore's stuff sometimes wasn't up to par. Whereas with Lazenby, his solo only movie in the role is one that most people would say is one of the best ones ever produced. So let's get on to the next one, and I think this one might be a little controversial. Yep, number 4, Daniel Craig. Craig is really good in the role. Particularly in Skyfall. He's really good in Casino Royale as well. My first viewing, I thought Casino was okay. Second viewing, it clicked with me why that movie is as loved as it is. Still think Skyfall is Craig's better movie of the two. But Craig is consistently good across all of his movies. The only scene in which I think he might not be the best is probably that weird hissy fit moment in Spectre. But I like the idea, because I like the idea of what Spectre is trying to do. It's trying to reveal that all of this has been sort of the machinations of Blofeld. All of Bond's pain. And I kind of like that as an idea. Even though the whole Blofeld Bond brother thing is a little controversial to some people. I mean, if you checked out my Scream rankings for the Ghost Faces, you know I am okay with that if it adds to the story. It kind of does in this case. It's slightly weaker than what it does for Scream with the sibling reveal in 3. But I think what makes Craig so memorable is the fact he probably loses the most out of any Bond. I mean, let's think about it, right? He technically won in Casino Royale, but at the cost of Vesper Lynn. Technically, he won in Quantum of Solace. Actually, he did win in Quantum of Solace. Skyfall is a complete loss for him across the board. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Silva beats him in this movie. And Spectre is kind of a win, and then the ending of No Time to Die is actually something I'm kind of okay with thematically for this iteration of Bond. That does make sense for where his journey would go. It makes sense. His story ends with him laying down his life to protect the only people he really cares about. Because, I mean, let's face it, he doesn't really care about anyone apart from those two people in No Time to Die. Not saying who, but, you know, in case you haven't... Okay, well, I mean, I guess Bond dying is the biggest spoiler. But it was definitely a weird moment seeing Bond get obliterated. But, I mean, thematically, it makes sense for this iteration. He lays down his life to save his family. Bond is not the guy you can have right off into the sunset, especially this one. So I actually think that creative choice actually does make sense. But regardless, it's just I prefer the top three. That's why Craig isn't in the top half. Also, interesting fact, I think this is my dad's favorite Bond. So, yeah, that's something interesting. Anyway, let's get into the top half of this list. We go from the most recent to the original, because my number 3 is Sean Connery. Now, let me explain. Connery, yes, he is iconic. He is Bond, James Bond. However, here's the big however, I genuinely think he's great in 3 of his movies. Now, those 3 are From Russia with Love, which is actually my favorite of his movies as Bond, Goldfinger, which gets better with each viewing, and I actually think he's really good in certain sequences of You Only Live Twice. Dr. No makes sense. He's still finding the footsteps of where his take on the character is going to go. Thunderball, he seems kind of uninterested, and Diamonds Are Forever is, it's something. But, honestly, I think he probably should have stopped with For Your Eyes Only. He ends his time meeting Blofeld, and then should be left for the next actor to pick up that plot line, to find how the next guy defeats Blofeld. Now, Connery gets all the iconic images of Bond, but he doesn't really get that moment to showcase his inner thoughts. The closest you get is the sequence in which he finds Jill painted gold in Goldfinger. I think that's about as close as you get in his movies to exploring his subconscious. But I mean, he does have some really cool lines. One of my favorite ones being after the Bond girl of Goldfinger asks where Goldfinger is. Bond says, "Playing his golden hop." Kind of ironic. But yeah, Connery is Bond, and if this was iconicity, you know, he'd be number 1 for sure. But this is personal favorites, and unfortunately, Connery's Bond is not the best. Now, like I said, these can fluctuate, go anywhere, any day, any time. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe this time next week, Connery will be number 2 on this list. But for now, he's number 3. So, who is the runner-up? Okay, so my runner-up is Timothy Dalton. Now, I think Dalton is really good in the role. Particularly in License to Kill. He is believable in his own stunts because he actually did them. Seriously, one of his stunt guys had to say, "Hey, I want to do something," because Dalton was doing so many of his own stunts. His stuntman had to say, "Hey, can I do something?" I just think that is actually really funny. But I think most people would agree Dalton is what Craig tried. Dalton tried where Craig succeeded. But I like a lot of the moments of Dalton in this. A lot of people don't like the sense of humor he has. I like that. It's actually a pretty underrated sense of humor. And particularly, he has more jokes than Living Daylights. You could tell that one was made for Roger Moore or my number one pick. But License to Kill is Dalton. That is his movie, and it is his better performance of the two. A full-on revenge story. Now, I said in my Ghostface ranking, I like a good revenge story. License to Kill might be my favorite revenge story. It is really good. It has high stakes. It's high drama. Dalton is... This is one of the closest encounters Bond has with a villain. And he is just really good in that movie. So, who is my favorite Bond? Well, if you've kept track, you should know at this point. So, here we go. My number one is Pierce Brosnan. Now, was he the first Bond I watched? No, that was Craig. But I think no Bond has ever had that essence. It's kind of hard to describe what makes Brosnan the best Bond. He is the perfect distillation of everything else that every other Bond does. He's got the coolness of Connery. He's got the humanity of Lazenby. He's got the humor of Moore. He's got the grit of Dalton in some cases. It feels like you took all of those elements, put them in a blender, blended it together, and then, here's Brosnan. And honestly, he is perfect in his 4 movies. Even his weakest one, Die Another Day, you could tell he's still giving it his all. GoldenEye is probably the best Bond movie. Oh boy, he is really good in all of his movies. And he gets some of the best villains in the series. And the best henchmen as well, I think. Alec Trevelyan, Elliot Carver, and Electra King are a fantastic trio of villains. And, of course, Femke Jensen's henchman role in GoldenEye is iconic. I think that's how you say her name. I'm not going to try to pronounce her name in the movies because I'd probably mess it up. But, yeah, let's just say it was a little weird watching her in the X-Men movies because, the whole time I was saying, all right, when's she going to try to start killing some people like she did in GoldenEye? But yeah, I think this Bond might have had the best dynamic with Q, apart from Connery. And actually, that moment in The World Is Not Enough, where it's Brosnan and Desmond Llewellyn, is one of my favorite pieces of acting from the entire series. It's such a great moment. Speaking of great moments, GoldenEye is slam-packed with them. And when Bond has to kill Electra King in The World Is Not Enough, that's a really good moment as well. So, but in my opinion, Brosnan is the best Bond. But, who knows? Whoever number 7 is, maybe they can top Brosnan. I don't know. If someone comes up and just showcases that they are the best Bond, and, that's entirely possible. But either way, that is it for this video. Who's your favorite Bond? And leave the rankings in the comments below. And please like and subscribe. But that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.